Calling in from the perspective of the work that I do in the DEI space is allowing people to come into the space and have conversations. Calling out is now you get to a point in saying that, well, we have called you in, we've tried to have a conversation, but now perhaps the learning is not happening or something is not going right, so there have to be consequences. What I like to add that really matters in this process of calling in and calling out is always have personal relationships before punishment. And I say this because sometimes as people who do the work, we feel the urge to constantly beat up people. The problem with that is that when you beat somebody up, even if they were trying to make a little bit of a difference, they now feel discouraged and they leave the conversation altogether. They leave the process. The goal is to have people at the table. So have differences. The calling in and the calling out process is going to happen when the conversations are happening, but have structures in place that brings people back to the table. Like you could say, okay, maybe this was a oops moment. Let's say sorry and go forward, or find a different way, but they have to work together at some point. We call people in when we realize that they have no information and that awareness needs to happen. So we call them in, we bring them onto the table, and we have a conversation. We call people out when we already have structures in place and policies in place and guidelines in place to deal with discriminative matters, and they still do not follow that. A good example, for example, would be, let's say your organization has come up with a process that says we do not use slurs, racial slurs, right? And somebody uses that. If there is a policy in place that perhaps says that, oh, if you use racial slur, then in this case you have to go back and do a microaggression training. That is calling out. So calling out doesn't necessarily mean that, oh, you're going to, like there's some punishment that is happening. No, it still brings us back to the same goal. How can we make the workplace or the society more inclusive? The power difference plays a big role into whether somebody will be called in or called out. You know, sometimes people fear to call leaders out on what's going on, what they're doing wrong, and so then this brings a scenario where the leadership should be in a position where they have that open door policy, where they can say, hey, look, we are going through this process, we're trying to make changes, so if you see that I make a mistake here, please feel free to reach out to tell me what is it that I'm doing wrong. But not unless a leader do that, most people will not call them out on their actions. It's important to know how to call people in or out, because the work of DEI is about wanting that change that has been missing in the society for the longest time. And in most cases, you find that the underrepresented communities who are advanced, who are asking for changes to be made, they do not have the ability to make the changes. So knowing how to call somebody in and call them out could be that piece that you need to bring them in as a partner or a collaborator or as an ally. If we don't get that part right, then we miss on the allies, we miss on the collaborators and the partners. And then now we are left with a situation where change cannot happen because those who still hold the keys to change are not part of the conversation.